Welcome back to Team Out of the Tank. This is Doug here, and today we're not going to be playing any games for the fact that in about a couple, 3 weeks from now, the new set is going to come out. So we're almost done with Ikoria, even though it feels like it just came out. And we're going to talk about how the power level of Magic, in my opinion, is getting to an alarming rate of, the next set has to keep topping itself, and pretty soon we're going to be in a state of where not no return, but it's gonna be like Kaladesh but worse, where everything is gonna get banned. Then it's gonna have to slow down and slow down. And I don't want it to go back to like Alpha and Beta, where your best creature was like a 3 drop, who was like a 2/2 with no effect type of thing. But pretty much, like I said, ever since I want to say War of the Spark, the set has just been like it's been like your friend that every time you tell a story, it has to try to top you, and that's how the sets have been. You got World of Spark that brought in a lot of planeswalkers. Some of them were good, but a lot of them were broken. And then Eldraine came out with Oko, which more enough wasn't that bad of a card. And then Theros came in with some of the enchantments, um, Archon of Grace, which once again wasn't that bad, but what it did bring really like exploded in power with the new companion set. And like I said, it's not just one card that's breaking the format; it's multiples. There is a lot of cards we're going to be touching on. And with Ikoria having companions, which once again wasn't that broken, if it would have been worked out right, it could have been an amazing set. Like companions go to your hand and you mulligan one card. So let's just say you start off with seven, you start off with six, your companion goes to your hand, or you can choose it to go into your deck. So it's like an extra card pretty much that starts from your side that goes to your deck. So your opponent knows kind of like, oh, that's what he's playing, or he's playing that type of deck. More restrictions. Like I said, the split cost in the meta round of discussion, the split cost was too easy for them. You can literally play Yorion in a white deck or blue deck, and there was no, there was no restriction to them. I can just play them anything and anywhere. But once again, we're just gonna talk about the power level of cards, how they've rapidly grown, and yeah, without further ado, let's just get into some examples. Okay, so here's an example of how cards got better. You got Tifa Sanity, which is the 3 drop, 2/2. Whenever he came in and he attacked, like he dealt damage to an opponent. You look at the top 3 cards. You pick one, the other two go to the graveyard. You keep one of those cards, play it whenever you want. At the end of the game, you give it back to your opponent. Um, and then there's Robber of the Rich, which came in Eldraine. It was a 2 drop for a 2/2. Comes in with Reach and Haste. I can understand, he's like a thief. He's climbing the roof. He has reach. He also comes in with haste for some reason. When Robber the Rich attacks, notice how it doesn't say it has to deal damage like the Sanity. Notice how it doesn't have to say you sack it or anything. You don't have to pay mana to activate the effect. It just has to tap as an attacking creature, and you get the effect. Which in mono red is what you love to do. You love to attack. There's no thinking outside the box with this card. With Thief of Sanity, I have to protect it. Gave me blue black, so I can go out of my way of I don't have to go out of my way of protecting it with counter cards. But it's a 3 drop card for a 2/2, so it can be easily shocked. I can literally go turn 4 Thief of Sanity. My opponent can shock it. I wasted my turn, technically 4. Even though I left that 1 mana for Mystical Speed to like counter. Robber Rich, on the other hand, I can mulligan, have 3 in my starting hand, play it, start taking your cards. The downside is to Thief of Sanity, even if Thief of Sanity left a board, I can still cast a card, but Robber the Rich, Archer Rogue has to, attack. But once again, that's so easy to meet that requirement. Thief of Sanity at least stayed on the board for 1 turn, unless you waited till turn 7 and you played the new god. I forgot his name, but the 5 drop gives all your creatures haste. But that's a turn 7 drop. Rob of the Rich is on turn 2, knowing that they're not going to miss any lands and they're going to mulligan. Not to mention that with control decks, you're going to have like a hand or even like aggro decks. Just taking a Gruul Beast, like a Gruul card that can like really help you, like your Crescent Beast or something, it just puts you at a disadvantage. All he did was attack. He didn't pay anything. He didn't do anything. It didn't even have to stay on the board long enough. He just attacked with it. Not to mention they're not legendary for Robber the Rich, so you can spam up to 4, take 4 cards, and then just cast them all on your turn. Or like obviously if you're playing control decks, you want to be careful with board wipes, so you're not going to spam the field. But against Luris decks, aggro decks, you just spam the board, take the cards, play them because they're all going to be low cost cards, and now you got yourself your board and their board on your side, and it's like they increased the power level. And I get it. If he would have dealt damage and he had haste, that would have been different because you also have to meet your hand requirement. But he doesn't have to hit. He just has to attack, and you have to have less cards than your opponent, which they're increasing the power level. They took out one mana from Thief's Sanity. They gave it haste. So in a mirror match, if my opponent goes, let's just like go turn one Fervent Champion, my opponent goes turn one Scorch Spitter, I can go turn two Rob of the Rich, and I'm already taking his cards, which let degenerates be degenerates in mirror matches, you know? But like I'm saying, like in a mirror match, it's still oppressive. He can start taking your shocks, your heraldic banners, so on and so forth. But let's talk about another card. Now, I don't know if you guys were playing when Darman came out. That's when I kind of originally started. I started in Ixalan, but Eldest Reborn came out, and I thought it was a good enchantment. You saw a lot of pro players. They played more like no more than two because it's a 5 drop. Your opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. They discard a card, and then you put target creature from your graveyard to the target creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to the battlefield under your control. So you can also take your opponent's. It wasn't an overpowered card. It was sometimes if your opponent didn't like counter it, it practically meant the game, you know? And it was a fair card. Your opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. So you let your opponent choose. They discard a card. They choose. You put target planeswalker or creature. So it's like if you let me kill your planeswalker, I'm gonna take it. If you don't, you can still have the planeswalker, but I can take another creature of yours, or I can bring back my planeswalker. So you have to watch out for that. But then we got Elspeth Conquers Death, which they added an extra mana requirement to it, so it's now a 2 planes, 3 colorless. But it says exile target permanent and opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or greater, which I feel like in an enchantment type deck, and I get it, some of the gods and demigods are enchantments, so you want to like Elspeth Conquers Death to get rid of them. But they should have worded it to where enchantment type creature or creature because a lot of new enchantments came out in Ikoria that nobody touches for the fact of Elspeth. The only reason they'll ever even touch it is because they're trying to play a fun gimmicky deck, which you will never see rise in competitive play. Now, I'm not saying I want, every enchantment card to be good, but this Elspeth Conquers Death removes all of the possibilities of it ever being good. Not to mention its second effect, non-creature spells your opponent cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn, which it's kind of okay, but I prefer discarding than paying 2 extra mana, especially against a mirror match or if I'm trying to like push for game. Like it not only does it stall you the game, it stalls your opponent from getting the game by exiling, it stalls you the opponent from getting the game again by making their cards to higher converted mana cost. Which once again, in a game where it's aggro matchup, their shocks are now 3 mana, so they have to think about like should I play my shock at 3 mana or should I play my Bosch and have my turn of a Bosch. And that's somewhat respect, But you choose what permanent they exile. I mean, you exile. So you can hit their creatures, their enchantments, And I feel like it should have been left up to your opponent. You make their opponent cast their cards for 2 more mana, which, like, I don't understand. Why wasn't it 1 more? Why does it have to be 2 more? And then on top of that, you return target creature or planeswalker from your graveyard, so it's not limiting from yours, but it gets a +1/+1 counter or a loyalty counter, which I don't know why they come in with a loyalty counter. I'm assuming because of the new Elspeth only had negatives. She had no +1 ticks, only negative ticks. But you can't design an enchantment like this and not make it legendary because you can stack Elspeths. And I've been in games where my opponent went Elspeth, bounced it with Yorion, next turn went Elspeth, and then they casted the third Elspeth in turn after, and by that point, let's just say, Casualties of War was like 10 mana, dude. 10 mana. Like, how was it not a legendary? Not to mention they brought their Teferi, their creatures, their Agent of Treacheries, and once again, it's not just one card that's causing this format to shift like this. It's an entire set of formats. Like Agent of Treachery was a thing. Teferi is a thing. Yorion is a thing. Like the power level is it just keeps increasing. And once again, oh, this Reborn wasn't that bad. You left the choice up to me, and then each opponent discards a card. So once again, it's up to me. This one, it feels like before Eldest Reborn, I was fighting against a guy who was at my equal height, my weight, and all that. And then when I'm playing against Elspeth Conquers Death, it's like I'm fighting Shaq, but he also has a gun. Like, you're not giving me much room to work with here. And and especially in this format, when you make a mistake, it's pretty much game over. Like, hey, I played Elspeth Conquers Death. My opponent went Elspeth Conquers Death. I didn't draw Teferi, so I played my Narset. He went Teferi, he bounced back my let's just say creature or something. Guess what? I made the mistake of choosing the wrong card with Narset. I'm not gonna win the game anymore, you know. And it's like there's too many variables for you to like just leave it up to chance, especially when you're trying to like not even win the game, just gain some advantage. That Elspeth Conquers Death tells you no because of your cards being two or more mana. Like it's too much, and it just does too much, especially for just being a regular enchantment saga. But before we start getting more heated on this stupid card, let's move on. Okay, so this one is not kind of the same, but in a way, it's relevant to the way the mechanics works in the format. All right, so we had adventures, which was creatures. When we first saw an adventure creature, we didn't know what it was. We didn't know how it worked. We're like, do we cast for out footsteps and then that's it? We lost the card, kind of like split cards, or are they gonna, work like how it was, where we cast it, it goes to the graveyard, then we can cast a creature because it's technically on an adventure, and pretty much we found out it went to exile but in its own pile. So you went further up footsteps, it gets exiled to its adventure's exile zone, and then you can cast it as a creature. That was a mechanic. But in that same mechanic, they gave us a card to work with it. It's memory theft. Target opponent reveals their hand, you choose an online card from it, and then that player discards it. I mean, I think they exile it, but then like you can choose a card from the adventure zone and then send it to the grave. And the reason Nurse is on the board, on the screen right now, is because you don't want to make, let's just say, for every color to play it, you don't want to make it to where it's also in black because then you can have Esper running the format. But if you would have made an artifact that was like 3 mana that said your opponent puts their companion zone in their companion in the graveyard, then it's like, well, I didn't get to play my companion. So you can't make it like that. Not to mention that with Luris, you want to hit it at turn 3 so that they don't cast it. Especially since you can only have one Luris in your companion zone, not in your deck. So you can't make it 3. So you can also make it 5 because then Luris would be the only deck running in that format. Just a sideboard card out. But and that's what I'm trying to get at. Like companions, they didn't go to your hand, so you can't hit it. They didn't go into your deck, so they can't mill it, or they have to wait till they draw it. It was there as your eighth card or your seventh card for turn one players, um, just waiting for you to cast it whenever you had the mana or whenever you thought the time was right. Which, once again, isn't that bad if we couldn't touch it. And you can't touch it early because you want to cast it. For example, Lurs, use a 3-drop. You can't have a 1 mana artifact because then people will be spamming for. Just get it out of the way. If they did that, then what's the point of playing companions? You know? But they gave us no way to play with them. To play around them. So literally, Abosh, Lurs, and Yorion are running the format because they can be played in any deck. So one day you'll be seeing Bant, and then the next day you'll be seeing Luca because, well, you can play him in any color. He's not mana costed. And then you can see Lurs, and then like it was just too much for companions, and it was too easy to cast them. You didn't like Noxious made a point where you can start the game with a companion having deal you 5 damage, so you start off at 15, so that way you're having a negative effect to playing it if you wanted to play it, but they didn't even give us a card to get it out. Like let's just say they made a memory theft 2 or something, and it said if your opponent started the game with a companion, they discard a card or they lose a life. Like now it's giving me an advantage of, hey, you didn't have a card in your head, well, you're gonna lose life. Oh, you had a card in your head, well, now you're gonna pitch it, so we kind of like balance out the tables. So that way it doesn't hit the companions. It still has that work, but they discard a card. Now it wouldn't have been perfect. I wouldn't say it would have been like an example, but there's no downside to running a companion. And even as you guys have seen online, like Temur Reclamation is now running a companion zone. So like they really pushed for them to be in the meta. And from a mechanic as adventure to where, hey, this is kind of cool and nifty, to where like they're literally shoving it down your throat more than that commercial was on YouTube about the stupid power banks. Okay, so here we have Azor the Lawbringer, which I feel like was decent enough of a creature. You got 6 mana, so it's hard to bring cast him down, but its stats are 6/6. He has flying, so it's not that hard to block. I mean, it is a little bit harder to block. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent can cast instants or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. So if I casted him, you know how to plan your next turn. You can still cast during my turn. So if you wanted to, let's just say, go I don't know, like you wanted to bounce him with a, it's that one mana card that just bounces a creature. Um, you can do that, but then again, you're giving him to me next turn to play again. But whenever Azor attacks, you may pay 3 mana and X, and if you do, you gain X life and draw X cards, which once again was a decent enough stat. A little overpowered to have that bottom half, seeing as how he literally stops your opponent from playing. But then we got Teferi, which is a 3 drop. Now everything is wrong about Teferi. Um, your +1 should not have been a +1. He should have been switched with your passive. So it should have been until your next turn you may cast sorcery spells as they had flash as your passive. So it should just mean you can cast sorceries whenever you can cast an instant. +1. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they can cast a sorcery, and is -3, which I feel like should have been a -4. So if you do -4, it takes you harder to get back up there. And if you do on like as soon as you drop him, he's dead. So it makes you think like I can't just drop him in, -3 return your creature, and then I still have the turn with him to keep building him up. Especially in control decks, you're gonna keep him on there, because once he sticks, if you try to kill it or remove it or try to like play a creature, I can counter and you have no way to respond because of this passive. So his +1 should have been switched with his passive. So it gives you like if you return, I can still cast cards, but if you +1, there's a chance I can, play a questing beast, attack, and kill it. If he was a 3 instead of a 4 loyalty. So I feel like everything just went wrong with Teferi, and this is once again one of the ways that he like this is just power creep. There was Teferi Mage Zalfir. Now before we move on, I want to say that I feel like he's gonna get reprinted. Just because he's a Teferi card and we're having a Teferi set, I feel like he's gonna get reprinted. So Teferi Mage of Zalfir, 2020 coming back. But he was a 5 drop. He had flash. He was 3 blue, 2 colorless, so it was a little bit more of you have to play him in a 2 color deck because he is a little bit risky to play. Creature cards that you own that aren't on the battlefield gain flash, and his Teferi passive it seems to always stick. Your opponent can only cast uh, sorcery cards anytime they can cast sorcery, type of thing. Um, I think he was also a 5/5, but pretty much this is what I'm saying. Like they power creep so much from this to Fairy being a 5/5 to now Azor being a 6/6, which once again is only for your next turn. So you kind of have to set up your game win with Azor. You have to play around that strategy if you did play him. But then you got Teferi, who literally requires no strategy. I go Teferi, you can't play cards on my turn or on your turn that are our counters. And like I said, if it was only sorcery cards, like I can still play my flash decks. Maybe then they could have some like saving hope, saving grace of being able to play. That didn't happen. You got your hey, I'm gonna cast my creature, I'm gonna counter, I have no response. I'm gonna cast my card, I have no response because you can't with Teferi. Azor, like I said, you have to build up for it. So if I go Azor, I would be like, okay, he's planning to end the game soon. So I'm gonna either try to go all in and end him, or I can try to like set him behind now. But you can't do that with the new Teferi. Like it's almost if he hits the board, you're gonna win the game, unless if you're playing against mono red. But mono red, like I said, they've got an already power creeped, which you're having to try to balance a scale that you rigged to not balance, but now you're trying to balance it. Like it's all over the place, dude. And especially with how creatures have been made from back then to now. And even then, I can probably guarantee you, like someone was complaining about this Teferi having flash. Like, why should he have flash? He shouldn't have flash. But that's neither here nor there. That's just Teferi being Teferi, and how Azor went from your turn to Teferi being every turn. Now, Growth Spiral is here just because of Euro. It's not an exact card, but in my opinion, I think Growth Spiral is an overpowered card. It's not game breaking. It is not, something that's going to ruin the meta. But it is a 2 drop instant, mind you, instant, that draws you a card and you may play a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Now, if, for example, it was limited to you may play a land onto your hand from your hand onto the battlefield only during your turn, it would give you less of a chance to cast it during your opponent's turn. So, for example, you can go turn 1, play a tap land. Turn 2, play a land, go Growth Spiral. You play a third land. That's it. You're kind of tapped out in a way. But now you can literally hold a negate or a growth spiral and then react to your opponent accordingly. So that's why I think growth spiral in a way is in a way overpowered. But then we got Euro, which is a 3 drop for some odd reason, and Croxa, which is a 2 drop. Now, Croxa isn't hitting the format as big as Euro, but these two cards are still severely overpowered because not only do they have enter the battlefield effects, they also have attack effects that stack. So, for example, you can go Euro, draw a card, gain 3 life, play land. Okay. As it enters the battlefield, it dies, so, good riddance. But then when it exiles, it stays on the board, and you still get that effect. So you can go Euro, Euro, and if you have Anissa, you can do this Euro, Euro, and then Euro exile, and you get 9 life. You draw 3 cards, and you play 3 lands if you have them or if you drew them. And once again, that's overpowered. That should have been once per turn. Not to mention that when they attacked, they shouldn't get those effects. But if they did, why didn't they make it an or? Like, you choose one of the three. You gain 3 life, you draw a card, or you play a land. Like, same thing with Croxa. You discard a card. If you don't have a card to discard, you can choose of the other two. What's it called? Sacrifice a land or take 3 life, which fits well into the Croxa because there was an enchantment. I forgot which one to call it, which one it was, but you give it to your opponent and they choose which one and they only have 3 options until the last one, which is they take one, or they make the life go down to one, or they give you five, like 20 creatures, but so on and so forth. Croxa should have been the same thing as Euro. You only get one of those effects. Your opponent can choose for Croxa. You can choose for Euro. You know, but no, they decided to give them all three. Croxa discards your hand. I mean, makes you discard a hand, which in a deck like we're now, it kind of doesn't matter. Now that people have started playing the Lantern, it kind of does. But you can literally pitch Euro and lose nothing. You can literally then go Euro, and I have gained more advantages. The other way around, I can attack. You can go Croxa. You make me discard a card. I lose 3 life, so I lost 3 life. But not everyone is gonna be playing these like Titans. Not to mention that they did kind of limit them to colors, but you can still play them in 3 color decks. There's Grixis, Croxa with Luris. There's Euro with literally almost everything. You know, but once again, this is an example of a creature that does everything. They literally draw you cards, gain you life, play lands. Croxa makes you discard. Crocs is a little bit watered down. That's why I guess he's a 2 drop. But I feel like he should have been better for your opponent to choose. Hey, I'm gonna sacrifice the land because I have a land in hand to replace it. But guess what? I still lost a resource on board. You know, I lost 3 life. But against Rakdos, which is super heavy in aggro, it I don't want to keep losing life like that. So I have to like try to get him off the board. Or I discard a card. Which hey, if I'm playing Reanimator deck, that doesn't bother me. But like there's no um choices almost, it feels like, like it's getting too above and beyond on how these creatures are getting more and more overpowered. But we're gonna get to the last example, and this is kind of my favorite example. But I feel like they should have been 4 mana costed cards each and escaped at 4. Now, this is my favorite example. We had Prime Speaker Vanifar, who came in, I believe, Guild of Ravnica. And then you have Enigmatic Incarnation, which came out in Theros Beyond Death, which Prime Speaker only hit creatures. You sacrifice a 4 drop, you bring in a 5 drop. Then you have, but she has to tap for it. So literally, you only do it once per turn. You tap Prime Speaker Vanafor, you sack a creature, you bring in a bigger one. Better effect or just bigger stats. You have Enigmatic Incarnation, which is a 4 drop enchantment. You exile an enchantment. You sacrifice another enchantment, which Theros was an enchantment based thing. So you could have literally sacked a demigod and brought out the original gods, or you could have just played Omen of the Sea, which is 3 drop, and then bring in a creature. So it was revolved around that. But then came out Luca, which for his -2 literally never makes these other two viable. Because why do it for a sacrifice of a creature when I can sack a token and bring out a 7 drop? A token with 0 converted mana cost goes from, let's just say, a 1/1 to a card that has a 2/3 stat, which isn't that bad, but it takes your lands. And once again, we already talked on Agent of Treachery and how broken he is, but you literally have turned a card that like makes tokens and gives me life into a card that takes your cards and gives them to me. Like as opposed to Prime Speaker Vanafor. Now, yes, if you wanted to run Agent of Treachery, once again, there was a chance that you can draw it, but you're not going to run 4 because what's the point when you have to sack your creatures? So you want to have your lower cost cards like Resident Reef and all that, come into play so you can sack them to get your bigger cards. Enigmatic incarnation, like I sacrifice my enchantments to bring out a bigger creature, but Luca just does all of that away because they all come out with one higher converted mana cost. But Luca just says you bring in a higher creature, and that's just his -2. That's not his -7, which is okay. And then his +1, which is a Vivian but better. Vivian, the War of the Spark one was you +1. You look at the top three, you select one of those cards, you exile it, and if it's a creature, you exile it, and you can play it whenever you want to. It has Flash. What's the point when they brought in Teferi? But then Luca came in and said, I'll do you one better. They don't have Flash. You exile the top three. Those creatures, you can play them whenever you want, as long as Luca's on the board. Which, I mean, yes, there is a threat of their Elspeth Conqueror's death and some Planeswalker removal, but no one's gonna remove your Luca when you have a bigger threat on the board. Like you're gonna remove my Luca over my, let's just say, 6/6 beast that's gonna run you over, because that was their mindset. Like, hey, you either choose their Godzilla that they played or their Luca, but Luca lets you dig through your deck so you can get cards that you don't need, especially in an 80 card, Bant Yurion deck. Exile the top three cards. Oh, there were some omens in the land. Well, I'm already at 8 mana with Fires of Invention. I don't care about that. Now when I draw what I need, it's gonna be a lot closer, and my deck's getting thinner, so I'm gonna get my resources a lot faster. And then as -2, I'm gonna create a token with Castle Ardenvale, which once again Castle Ardenvale not that bad, but when you pair it with Luca, and like I said, this is a thing where like you got a cobweb of strings. You can't just pull one and expect every problem to be fixed. Now I'm not saying that every card in standard is like broken and should be like changed and formatted. There's some good cards, like for example Prime Speaker Vanafor, Enigmatic Incarnation. Like those are good cards. Those are cards that were like thought into and made. But Luca, like you just slept, Vivian +1 effect. Prime Speaker Vanafor, let's make that better, -2 on there. And then for because he's supposed to be in a creature deck, you just slap in his he deals damage equal to every creature on the battlefield on power to your opponent. Like there's no reason to go -7 when I can literally go -2, take everything from you. And that once again, I feel like should have been thought out more. Like I get it. If my opponent went Yurion and Lucas said, exile creature, you bring a creature from your deck onto the battlefield with two or more converted mana cost. So or not two more converted mana cost. So it gives you like from 5 I go to 7. So it makes them exile their one Yurion, or they're gonna waste more resources playing Yurion in the main deck. So your opponent could go Yurion, draw Yurion, but they didn't get their Luca because guess what? They had to run that spot on Yurion, because so they can make the Luca effect work. So once again, they didn't really think out much into it, and because of just how broken he is, no one's gonna really play Prime Speaker Vanafor and Enigmatic Incarnation, because why should you? When there's a way, way better card like Luca is Usain Bolt, right? Prime Speaker Vanafor Enigmatic Incarnation, Usain bolted to the ground. Thank you, John Oliver. But there's that, and then you are seeing a little bit of play in the Neo form with the Winota deck, but that's just for Winota. Like Winota is so easy to like stop. You just before you declare your battle step, I'm just kill your token that's not a human. It's so easy. Not to mention that if you put the pressure on them, you're making them block, so they're not gonna cast their what do you call it? Um, Not raise the alarm, but their Legion War Boss, because you're like, hey, he has one mana up for shock. He's gonna kill it by the end of the turn. So let me hold up this mana, which gives me more a little bit room to work with. But once again, that's Winota. She's a different card, but like talking about this right now, it's so stupid how they made Luca. And when people first saw it, he's like, oh yeah, he's not gonna be played a lot. But then, like I said, you just exile a token, and you just made all these other cards obsolete, which had a really good gimmick. I like playing Prince Big of Vanafor. I had two of. That's all you needed in deck because you don't want to draw more of, because she's a legendary creature. So it's not like you can play one and then sack the other. So all you wanted was two, and it's sad to see that you can't do that gimmick of, hey, watch me turn this 4-drop creature into a 5-drop, and then this 5-drop into a 6-drop while still getting the effects of attacking and all that. Because Luca just literally, haha, my artifact token wall now becomes a 2/3 that takes your lands, so you can't even play your cards, which is in a way worse than Teferi. Like I never thought Luca would be worse than Teferi. So that was just my little rant on how cards are getting a little bit too overpowered. Once again, it's not just one card ruining the format. It was introduced all the I feel like all the way back from World of the Spark. Uh, it's a collective thing, you know. I don't want to play a game where I play a 4 drop and he has a 1/1 effect with Death Touch, you know. But then again, I don't want to play a game where you literally go turn 2 human archer. You're starting to take my resources. Well, guess what? You know, I didn't play around this strategy. I mold back my resources. So in game 2 and 3, I'm gonna have to play a little bit different. But it's kind of hard to when your opponent goes Luca and then he literally takes his token and makes it a what do you call it, agent of treachery, and you literally have made some cards ineffective thanks to Prime Speaker Vanifar doing something similar and enigmatic incarnation. Same thing with Theros, not Theros, Elspeth Conquers Death. I shouldn't have to play against 4 of them that stack their passives. You know, they should have been legendary enchantments. I shouldn't have to play against Teferi where my opponent literally bounced my creature or my artifact that I feel like I was going to do a really cool effect with. So he bounced my artifact, and now I can't respond to his cards on his turn and on my turn. So like, it's just, it's just the power level of Magic once again is getting too high. Companions kind of, it kind of like turned it over to a new leaf, you know. And I feel like Kaladesh was in a way its own thing, and pretty soon we're gonna get to it again with the next set. It's gonna be a Teferi set, so it's not gonna probably be as game changer as the Chandra, like you know how Chandra was. She brought in the Elementals, which once again it was a good set. You know, you had Risen Reef, 3 drop with a 1/1, where when he came in you did get an effect, and if your opponent played another Elemental, I mean, if you played another elemental, you get the effect, but your opponent can react to it. It's a 3 drop with a 1/1. Easy Shock would do it. Lava Coil will take care of it. So it left me in a position of, do I want to play Risen Reef now, as opposed to how it is now? Like, there's go Fires of Invention, go Luca, Agent Treachery, start taking your lands. Yorion bounce it, Teferi bounce it, and just keep doing it over and over and over again, especially with companions. Like, all right, I know he's playing a boss, so he's gonna be hyper aggressive. But how do I play against? I didn't choose to run one because I didn't feel like playing companions is good, and I shouldn't be punished for thinking companions aren't as good. So I feel like in a way you've already started, or like in a back pedal of the game, and you shouldn't have to play a mechanic. Dredge was overpowered because it was overpowered, but Companions is a different mechanic from that. You know, Storm once again. You cast it, you get copies of it, so it's not like I can't just negate that copy because I get copies of it. Companions, on the other hand, is you start with a new like card in your hand that I can't respond to it. I can't make you pitch it. I can't make you get rid of it, and all you need to do is just run one of. I know there's some decks that run multiples of. There's some Yorion decks that run an extra one in the deck. There's some with the not Kahira, but the yeah, Kahira. They run it because they get the +1 effects, which I think is a legendary creature, so you don't stack. But if they do get rid of it, you still have another one to play. But once again, if it was added to your hand, it'd be a whole different story. If it was like you don't add it to your hand, but instead your opponent sends one card from their hand to the deck, like, okay, so instead of him having 8 cards, he now has 7 cards. So we're like in an even footing. But if he has no cards in hand, he still has a companion, so that gives you a little bit of insight, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. But I just don't want another set after, well, even with Teferi, because I feel like Teferi's gonna get reprinted again, the creature, so yes, Slash, and same thing, so forth. And it's like I don't want to play a game where like I have not even counter cards, like I can't even like, and I get it, I do like to play Frilled Mystic, but Slitherwisp, what do you call it, the Brineborn Cutthroat. I can't even respond to Teferi with those. Like, creatures that literally had a point to stand out are the same as any other creature because of stupid Teferi. And all they had to do was just say sorcery cards. That's it, just sorcery cards. And I can play my stupid creatures. My little 2/1 that becomes a 4/4, I mean a 5/4, Like, once again, I'm just ranting again, but this is just my opinion on Magic being too powerful. I hope you guys enjoyed the video of a guy complaining. If you did, click the like button below. Don't forget to subscribe. We have a Facebook channel, a Facebook group on Facebook. Obviously, if you want to come and talk to us, you want to talk about deck techs, say you made it to Mythic and all that. By all means, come join us. I'll put the link in the description below. We are Team Out of the Tank, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Stay safe.